Now, the UN Security Council held a meeting amidst the Israel-Hamas war, where world leaders voiced their concerns on violation of international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip.
Now, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres pleaded for civilians to be protected in the Israel-Hamas war. Now, that is a common theme that we've seen in all these diplomatic efforts as well.
Let's hear what he had to say.
I'm deeply concerned about the clear violations of international humanitarian law that we are witnessing in Gaza. Let me be clear, no party to an armed conflict is above international humanitarian law.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has reiterated America's stance at the UN Security Council meeting, highlighting UN's role in the crisis. He said that the United States recognizes the right of all states against terrorism. Blinken also talked about how the hostages should be released with immediate effect. He added that all terrorist groups like Hamas, ISIS or Laskhar-e-Taiba should face the consequences of their actions, and the civilians should not be on the bearing brunt of the war.
Their loved ones must be released immediately, unconditionally, and every member of this council, indeed, every member of this body, should insist on that, insist on that, insist on that. We're grateful to Qatar, to Egypt, to the ICRC for helping secure the release of 4 of Hamas's hostages, but at least 200 more, and again, from many of our nations, are still in the grip of Hamas. As this Council and the UN General Assembly have repeatedly affirmed, all acts of terrorism are unlawful and unjustifiable. They're unlawful and unjustifiable whether they target people in Nairobi or Bali, in Luxor, Istanbul or Mumbai, in New York or Kibbutz Berry. They're unlawful and unjustifiable whether they're carried out by ISIS, by Boko Haram, by Al-Shabaab, by Laskhar-e-Taiba, or by Hamas. They're unlawful and unjustifiable whether victims are targeted for their faith, their ethnicity, their nationality, or any other reason.
Blinken also spoke to Guterres on the sidelines of the UNSC meet. He talked about how the conflict between Israel and Hamas could spill over into a wider war, drawing in Lebanon's heavily armed Hezbollah.
Meanwhile, Palestinian Authority's Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki called out the United Nations, saying that its inaction to stop massacres by Israel on Gaza are inexcusable.
The ongoing massacres being deliberately and systematically and savagely perpetrated by Israel, the occupying power, against the Palestinian civilian population under its illegal occupation must be stopped. The Security Council has a duty to stop them. The international community is obliged under international law to stop them. It is our collective human duty to stop them. Now, continued failure at this Council is inexcusable.
Even as the humanitarian crisis deepens in the Gaza enclave, with lives of over 1 million people at stake, lack of essential supplies and increasing deaths of civilians, there are few signs yet of tensions in the West Asia easing.
The big focus is on preventing the conflict from spreading beyond Israel and Gaza. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has given us all the updates on the discussion surrounding the crisis at the UN Security Council meet. Listen in.
Here at the United Nations Security Council, high-ranking Arab officials called for an immediate ceasefire to the Israeli-Hamas conflict, while UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres alleged violation of international law in Gaza. Israel's foreign minister expressed anger over the Secretary General's comments, pointing directly at him and asking him, "What world are you living in?" A gesture which was then followed by a tweet by the Israeli ambassador to the UN mission saying that Guterres must resign. We later learned that the Israeli foreign minister had canceled his bilateral meeting with Antonio Guterres. However, according to the Secretary General's office, Antonio Guterres was scheduled to meet with a representative of families of hostages being held captive by Hamas who had accompanied the Israeli foreign minister to the United Nations today here in New York, along with a representative from the Israeli mission. But the question many are asking is, in an institution like the United Nations and the UN Security Council, which has become notorious for being toothless, ultimately, what can be done? Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.